Hello and welcome to our channel. We're counting down the top 10 historical events that would go viral today. Make sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Let's get right into it. Number 10. The Great Molasses Flood. On January 15th, 1919, a massive wave of molasses crashed through the North End section of Boston, killing 21 people and injuring over 150 others. What caused this disaster? Well, you guessed it, a tank filled with 2.5 million gallons of molasses. This industrial accident was caused by a faulty valve that had been dislodged when a nearby streetcar passed by. The flood traveled at about 35 miles per hour, reaching areas over 1 mile away from the storage tank. Cars were flipped, windows were shattered, and buildings were leveled by this wall of sweetness. This horrific event inspired a number of fictional stories, most notably Disney's The Rescuers Down Under. Can you imagine a real-life version of this happening today? It would definitely be all over Twitter. There's no doubt about it. No. 9. Hat Check Girl Saves President. On December 14, 1920, just a few months after the Great Molasses Flood, President Woodrow Wilson suffered a potentially fatal assassination attempt. A young man named Giuseppe Zangara wanted to make a name for himself and decided that killing the president would do just that. However, before he could pull the trigger, a 23-year-old hat-check girl named Helen Viola spotted his gun. She quickly grabbed his arm and yanked him around to face her, giving other Secret Service agents enough time to tackle the would-be assassin. Zangara was eventually sentenced to 15 years in prison, but only served 5 due to his cooperation with the federal government against the mafia. In an interview following the incident, Miss Viola said she didn't think much about her actions until later. "I never realized," she said, "what I might have done by not grabbing his gun." Imagine if this story happened today. Without a doubt, Viola would be trending on Twitter, and everyone would be praising her bravery. We can only hope that there are still many secret heroes like her out there today. No. 8. Boxing Day Tsunami. The Boxing Day tsunami was one of the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history. It was caused by a 9.1 magnitude earthquake that occurred off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia on December 26, 2004. The quake triggered a series of tsunamis that swept across the shorelines of 14 countries, most notably Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, and Thailand. Over 227,000 people were killed, over 800,000 injured, and more than 148,000 people were reported missing. If this devastating event happened today, it would be plastered everywhere on social media, dominating every news feed. There would be an endless stream of relief efforts being promoted and live updates on the latest death tolls. Fortunately, even though it was almost exclusively organic promotion back in 2004, the world still managed to raise over $1 billion in donations. Number 7. First moon landing. On July 20, 1969, humans took a giant leap for mankind when Neil Armstrong became the first person to walk on the moon. As part of NASA's Apollo 11 mission, Armstrong and 2 other astronauts, Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins, successfully landed their spacecraft in the Sea of Tranquility. After about 2 hours on the lunar surface, Armstrong and Aldrin returned to the lunar module, while Collins remained in orbit aboard the Command Service module. During his time on the moon, Armstrong famously said, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." If this incredible moment happened today, it would undoubtedly be the top trending story on every platform. The world would stop whatever they were doing to tune into the live broadcast. And once Armstrong set foot on the moon, memes and fan art would instantly begin pouring out of every crack on the internet. Number 6. Titanic sinks. On April 15, 1911, the British passenger liner Titanic struck an iceberg during its maiden voyage from Southampton to New York City. After hitting the iceberg, the ship began to take on water and slowly began to sink. An estimated 1,500 passengers and crew members died from exposure, drowning, or injuries. At the time, newspapers raced to report the breaking story, but they quickly learned that rumors were spreading faster than the facts. For example, there was widespread speculation that the ship's captain, Edward Smith, had seen the iceberg but ignored the warnings from nearby ships. This rumor was later disproven when investigators found no evidence that any other ship had warned the Titanic about the iceberg. Still, despite the tragedy, the Titanic continued to capture the public imagination. Books were written, movies were made, and songs were recorded about the doomed ship. If the sinking of the Titanic happened today, it would be one of the biggest news stories of the year. The internet would be flooded with photos and videos of the wreckage, and the personal stories of those involved would be shared on every social media platform imaginable. No. 5. Battle of Little Bighorn. The Battle of Little Bighorn, also known as Custer's Last Stand, took place on June 25, 1876, near Little Bighorn River in Montana Territory. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer and his 7th Cavalry Regiment were tasked with stopping the Lakota Sioux and Northern Cheyenne tribes, who were migrating to a reservation in South Dakota. However, Custer and his men were met with fierce resistance from the Native Americans and were ultimately defeated. All 265 soldiers in Custer's regiment were killed, making it one of the most devastating defeats in American history. If the Battle of Little Bighorn happened today, it would immediately become the top trending story on every major news outlet. There would be protests and debates over how such a large military force could be taken down by a smaller group of indigenous people. It would reignite discussions about the treatment of Native Americans and the legacy of colonialism in the United States. Number 4. Russian Revolution. On November 7, 1917, a group of Russian revolutionaries led by Vladimir Lenin seized control of the government in Petrograd, Russia. The revolution quickly spread throughout the country, and by the following March, the Russian Empire had collapsed. Lenin established the world's first communist state, and the Russian Revolution inspired similar movements around the world. If this pivotal moment in world history happened today, it would likely be covered by every major news outlet. Analysts would debate the implications of a communist takeover and the global ramifications of such a powerful nation adopting a new form of government. Social media would explode with theories and predictions about what a communist Russia would look like in the modern day. Assassination of JFK. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated while riding in a motorcade in Dallas, Texas. He was shot and killed by Lee Harvey Oswald, who was later killed by Jack Ruby while in police custody. The assassination of JFK is one of the most well-documented events in history, but it still remains one of the most controversial. There are countless conspiracy theories surrounding the assassination, and some people still believe that the government is hiding important evidence. If this tragic event happened today, it would be streamed live on every news channel and be the top story on every website. Every social media platform would be buzzing with activity as people try to come to terms with the shocking footage they were seeing. Unfortunately, because of how graphic the footage would be, it would also likely lead to increased regulation of live streaming and tighter security measures around government officials. No. 2. Berlin Airlift. The Berlin Airlift was a major turning point during the Cold War. It began on June 1948 when the Soviet Union blockaded West Berlin in an attempt to force the Western powers to abandon their post-war plans for the city. In response, the United States, The United Kingdom and France organized an airlift to supply the people of West Berlin with food, fuel, and other essential supplies. Over the course of the next 11 months, more than 2.3 million tons of supplies were delivered to West Berlin. If the Berlin airlift happened today, it would be one of the most significant stories of the year. The world would watch intently as cargo planes flew back and forth between West Berlin and the rest of the world. It would be a show of strength between Russia and the NATO countries, and everyone would be waiting to see how the story would end. No. 1. Fall of the Berlin Wall. On November 9, 1989, the government of East Germany announced that citizens of the country could travel to West Germany without a visa or a permit. This marked the end of the Cold War and the beginning of a new era in world history. People from both sides of the wall gathered at the border and began to tear it down. The fall of the Berlin Wall was a symbol of hope and freedom, and it inspired people all over the world. If the fall of the Berlin Wall happened today, it would be broadcast live on every news network and dominate every social media platform. People would pour into the streets to celebrate the end of the conflict and the beginning of a new era. It would be a truly historic moment, and one that we will never forget. Thank you guys for watching. That's all for now. I'll see you next time.